To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Herrenkohl is Managing Director at AchieveNEXT, a Philadelphia-based company that provides a wide spectrum of executive and professional services to help leaders and their enterprises achieve success and corporate excellence. Prior to joining AchieveNEXT, Eric operated his own retained executive search firm for over 20 years. In addition to being a published author, Eric has made appearances on Businessweek, Fox News, and NBC News, and his articles have also appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Inc.com, CareerBuilder.com, MSNBC.com, and Monster.com. He's got a wealth of experience. I'm just so thrilled that he's here to share his expertise with us today. Eric, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Mike. It's great. It's great to see you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we've talked a little bit before I hit record, and your intro here was very limited. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit more? What more do we need to know about Eric personally and professionally?
Yeah, thank you. So I describe myself as a recovering headhunter. So I had a recruiting background early on, and contingent search, CFOs, controllers for another firm. Started my own practice ultimately, and I really began that as an executive coaching practice. That was always my interest. And Mike, you and I were talking a little bit before we got on here. I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. A big wrestling town, Bethlehem Steel. But my parents were academics. So I was like an academic kid in a steel town. And so I wanted to figure out a way to combine psychology and business. That's what I thought would be really cool. And I always felt, as soon as I heard about executive coaching, I thought, man, that's what I want to do. I started my own business as an executive coaching practice and had some really great success right out of the chute. Sold a couple, things that defy gravity. So I sold a couple of very high level, like fly around on the client's airplane kind of executive coaching engagements right out of the chute. But when you have your own business, as you well know, the only person you have to fool is yourself. And I just thought to myself, I'm 34, my wife's home with our kids, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills doing this month in and month out. So I expanded my range of services, ended up getting back into recruiting, built a retained executive search firm, focused on end-to-end supply chain that'll work with companies like Nestle and automotive aftermarket, and a whole bunch of different businesses. But my passion was really executive coaching. And so that ultimately is what led me back into coaching on my own. And then I had an opportunity to step in and take over this practice, which I've done for over 4 years. And it's been a great run.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let's talk about that. AchieveNEXT. I always try and give some clarity to the audience. So you're working for a firm now called AchieveNEXT. Can you tell us what the company does and what's your role, Eric? What do you do?
Yeah. So AchieveNEXT is a leadership consulting firm. I lead the executive coaching practice. So I have about 20 executive coaches on our slate. I lead that practice. And, executive coaching is working with senior executive leadership teams and individual executives on their own professional effectiveness, professional development, and helping them and their teams to connect the dots between business outcomes, financial results, and leadership and management behavior. So that's what I do.
Yeah, fair enough. So Eric, I always, again, provide some clarity here. If you were limited to just a few sentences, if I caught you in the hallway or somebody recognized you for this podcast and, didn't hear it for the first time, in 2, 3, 4 sentences, what is your philosophy of leadership?
Yeah, I saw this question that you shot over beforehand. And those are always great thought-provoking questions. I think, first of all, leaders have followers. and leaders have influence. And I think from a philosophy of leadership, I think the best leaders that I've been around, they know themselves, they are themselves, they're genuine. They have a vision that they personally find compelling, and they go after it. And other people who share their values, perspective, share their excitement, and they come with them on the ride. And in a sense, I think that is at a top level, I think that's leadership. Does that break down into a lot of other components? It absolutely does. But that to me is the essence of leadership.
Yeah, fair enough. Well said. I have to ask you the timeless question: are leaders born or made?
That is also a great question. And I'll tell you what, my question to that is changed over time. I used to think leaders are born 100%. And I'll share some of my own story as we move along here. But I increasingly feel that, everybody, I think you are to some degree, each of us is born with our unique personality. I think to the extent that we learn to live out of who we are, out of who God made us to be, other people will be attracted to that. Other people will be influenced to that. So I do think you can make leaders. Now, I think we have to draw a distinction. That doesn't mean everybody ought to be a CEO, or anybody ought to be an executive coach, or anybody ought to, lead a podcast. That's not the point. But I do think the point is that it is a journey to understand yourself, know yourself, be yourself. And if you can do that, and if that's important to you to do, you will, without in some ways intentionally trying to be a leader, which I think is actually often a counterproductive exercise, you will see you do have people who are bought into you, and you are having an influence, and thus you are a leader.
Yeah, well said. Well, I during my research, I saw that you published a book. I've not read it yet. I look forward to that. The book is titled How to Hire A Players, Finding the Top People for Your Team, Even If You Don't Have a Recruiting Department. And boy, Eric, that is really good, because most of the firms I deal with are, even some larger ones, don't have their own recruiting department. They pay for retained search, executive search, whatever the case may be. So this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I always tell people you can't build billion-dollar companies without billion-dollar leaders. I mean, you need the right, you can't play D1 ball with D3 roster. It's just that simple, Yeah. So I love this topic. So I'm going to drill into it a bit. But before we do, why did you write the book, and what audience is it aimed at?
So I wrote the book as I was building my retained executive search practice. But I kind of had a unique perspective, because I was a headhunter, but I'd also was and had been an executive coach. I had worked with a lot of small to mid-sized companies. And while the retained search work that I did was often for quite, much bigger companies, I still had a lot of mid-market clients with whom I worked. And they were exactly what you just said, Mike. They didn't have recruiting departments. They barely have human resources. But the top 20% of those companies are really great companies. So they need talent just like everybody else needs talent. And so the book is really written maybe not the most creative title in the world, but it's literally like the title is what the book is about. It's to say, listen, you got a good company. You're not enormous. You don't have your own internal recruiting department, but you got to have to systematize how you go about identifying, attracting, recruiting, and keeping top people. How do I do that? And then the book was written to answer that question.
Yeah, I love that. So we're going to drill into pretty deep, but at a high level, I'd like you to just share with us, what do you think at the highest level, the most common issues or situations or challenges that you feel senior leaders face regarding bringing top tier talent into their organizations?
Too many business people in general, and this certainly includes small and mid-sized business owners, CEOs, don't view recruiting as their job. It is an interruption to their job. It's something they have to do. It's something they rely on HR on. HR is going to go post a job. I got a job opening. We got to go find it. Find me somebody. But if you look at the best people, Mike, this is something you and I just briefly touched on before. If you look at the best leaders, they attract people. They do. And when I was in retained search, one of the things that I would often note, and it was not that many people as a percentage, but there are leaders who they hire all the people they used to work for, and all the people who used to work for them, and all the people who used to work for them want to come work for them. And if you look at the roster, they follow them around.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. Now, how to be that leader, I think that's the hard part. I think there's some counterintuitive things about how to be the kind of person that attracts other people. But I would say that is one. And then two, once you're into the role, everybody's so busy and recruiting is really time consuming. It just is. So how do I actually allocate time? Like, what do I actually do practically, tangibly today, this week, this month that can really help me to build a funnel of talent that I can bring into my business? People don't have any answers to that. And that's part of what I address in the book. And, and it's part of what I still coach leaders on today.
Yeah, I wanted to drill down on one aspect of that. Thank you for that answer. We touched a little bit about this prior to hitting record. I have always told people that I believe now, I'm talking at the executive level, that many companies and search firms not only emphasize you're getting a great candidate here. I think you really need to look at this guy or gal. I think she could be a great CFO or COO or CEO. And you're not only getting a great person, you're getting a great network. This gal has a history of attracting and retaining top-tier talent. And I feel if you hire her, it's only a matter of time before top-tier people are going to follow her. And as important, the top-tier people that are already there, they're going to love her, and she's going to retain them as well. Any thoughts on that secondary trait of an exceptional executive?
Well, I'll tell you something. Whoever the recruiter was or recruiters were that you heard say that, really knows what they're talking about. Because I actually think can be an overlooked component of recruiting talent. And it is, it's essential. It's absolutely essential. So I think then the trick becomes, let me take this two different ways. One is, let's say I work, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to flip this around for just a second. Let's come back and talk recruiting.
Sure.
If I'm a director level person, for example, in a business, one of the easiest things for me to do is go heads down, focus on my job, work 8 to 10 hours a day, go home exhausted, come back the next day, do it again, lather, rinse, repeat, get to the weekend, hang out at my kid's game, go back and do it again. And I can't tell you the number of not only director level folks, but senior executives with whom I work today who would tell you, man, if I had this to do over again, I would invest a lot more in my network. We are all our network. Part of our value for all of us is our network. That makes many of us very uncomfortable, and we don't feel like we're very good at it. And I think there are things that we can address there, because I don't think it's as hard as it looks. And we don't have to be raging extroverts and hitting every cocktail party in order to be that person. But it's really important to cultivate that network. And when you find executives like the one that you just discussed, right, who said, hey, this woman is really terrific, she's a great leader, and she's got a great network, that doesn't just happen. That's intentional. She allocated time to it. She understood it as a very important business function and personal and professional development function, because it pays off. But it's really, you want to talk about something that's really easy to gloss over. It's really easy for many people to gloss over.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, thank you for the detailed answer. So during my research, I looked at some book summaries of your book and a table of content and all that. And there's several issues, among many really fine ones in there, that I'd like you to maybe share some insights on. I know you're looking at the list I sent you, so let me read them first for the audience, and then you can take them one at a time. And so, audience, what I focused Eric on were these topics: creating an A-player mindset throughout your organization, developing a farm team of A player talent, becoming the hunter versus the hunted at industry conferences and events, finding pools of A player talent your competitors are missing, ending attempts to turn C players into A players, knowing how to turn B players into A players, and becoming an influencer who attracts A player talent. And Eric, you are free to answer these in any sequence that you see fit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll be a little bit of a linear thinker. I'll hit them mostly in order, but we'll see how this goes.
Great.
So an A player mindset, there are a couple different ways that we can talk about that, but let's talk about it from an executive leadership standpoint. An A player mindset says, hey, listen, ideally, I want an A player in every job in my company. And I say it that way because I've spoken to a lot of CEO groups on this. And what I figured out is that whether they actually do it or not, when I say that, should hire an A player in every role. Even if they don't actually do it internally, they kind of like fold their arms. And they're like, yeah, I got to tell you, I'm not buying it. And the reason they're not buying it is because many people have a working definition of A player as talented, but very difficult. You think about the best salesperson on your team, right? As my friend Mike Weinberg, who's a sales coach, describes, the best salesperson on your team is the guy who just kills his quota every single month. But when he's trying to use the copier and the copier jams, he doesn't get new paper for it. He kicks the copier, curses, walks away, and lets it be somebody else's problem. Now you're going to keep that guy because he's your top salesperson. But as a mid-market business leader, you're like, how many of these people can I have around? Well, I have a little bit of a different definition of A player, which I think is an important place to start, which is an A player is the top 10 to 15% of talent for a particular role at a particular level of compensation. So we just want the best that money can buy. But there's a difference between somebody who's making 80,000 and somebody who's making, 380. Those are completely different people. What's the comp range? And the other thing is to say that we're always looking for top talent, always. And I think it's, it's the Steve Covey, important but not urgent. It is rarely urgent to say, I got a team that basically we've duct taped it together, it's working, right? A lot of business, let's be honest, a lot of business is, look, it's working. It's good enough. I got 1,000 other things I got to do. I'm not going to rip I'm not going to rip that Band-Aid off. And you know what? Often that's the right decision. However, if our businesses are on a growth trajectory, we have to be thinking about the talent that's going to get us to the next level. If you're the CEO, if you have a C in the front of your title, that's a big part of what you're paid for. Is do you have the talent to move to the next level? You're not being paid to just think about today's level. You have people who are working for you who are thinking about today. You're thinking about tomorrow. And tomorrow is achieved through talent. And we all know that, all the business cliches, right? Culture eats strategy for lunch, and there are 100 of them. But what does it really come down to? Right people, right seats. Jim Collins. Right people, right seats. It's an execution. It's a point of business execution, right people, right seats. That's the A player mindset of like, look, I got to make sure that I got the right leaders in place. If I have the right leaders in place, they're going to do, Mike, exactly what you referred to. They're going to attract people. They're not going to be intimidated to hire top talent. They're going to get things done. We're going to move the ball forward. And if I don't, we're not going to do it. We're just going to sit around and we're going to do the same thing we did last year. And that's not good enough.
Awesome. Yeah, great.
All right. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, sure. Just go ahead and keep the flow going.
So farm team, developing your farm team. If you think about in baseball, in Major League Baseball, where we're in, pitchers and catchers have just reported. Actually, that's not true. We're now into the first spring training games. Grapefruit League is on. But if you think about Major League Baseball, the way Major League Baseball works is, if your shortstop goes down today, you got a new one flying in from Clearwater, Florida, or Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, or Phoenix, Arizona, wherever your minor league teams are. You got somebody else in the field today. That's a farm team. So I always challenge people to think about, where's your farm team of talent? Now, if you're running a middle market business, then you're going to come back to me and say, Eric, I mean, listen, we can't hire people and have nothing, I can't hire my bench. I mean, a couple people, here and there, depending on the size of the business, but I just can't afford to do that. I'm like, listen, my point is not that your farm team has to work for your business today. My point is you need to know their names.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to talk more about, relational leadership and some other things that we work on a lot. And I'll tell you front and center in our whole entire business, and I'm squarely a part of this. We have a philosophy of relational leadership. So I operate out of a relational lens. And if that's not congruent with people, if that's not how they think about leadership, that doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that we're not going to see things eye to eye. But to me, I want to know my talent. I want to know people way before I need them, because the day you need somebody is not the day to be, investing in the relationship. The day you need them is the day to be following up the person that you've built the relationship with and say, hey, listen, I got something. What do you think? And in today's environment, right, here we are in 2024, operating in this fully distributed environment, many, many times, we don't need a full-time C-suite leader. We need a seasoned 1099 contractor who can airdrop in, get a job done, attract some people, bring the right resources in, solve a problem, and leave. I spend a good chunk of every day about investing in fact, right before this call, I hopped off of a call with somebody who's on my farm team. And she's really, really good, really good. I know I'm going to be able to utilize her. But you got to know the talent, if you want to deploy the talent. So
yeah, yes.
What do you think about that? Give me a little bit of reaction, Mike, and then
I think it's great, and I wanted to ask you to clarify. I believe that you did explain your views on what relational leadership is. But I'd like you to, if I just asked you that question, Eric, I know you're big on this. What's your definition of relational leadership? Because I know where you're going, and I think it's important that the audience truly understands what you mean by that term.
I invest in our firm. Relational leadership is the umbrella under which AchieveNEXT goes to market. And I love it because, most corporate mantras are like, yeah, that's what we stand for, but it's not actually what we do. But this one is it's really good. There are different ways to lead. And I think anybody, this whole idea, there's only one way to be a leader. That's not true. There are all kinds of ways to be a leader. And there are all kinds of ways to build credibility in people's eyes. And there are all kinds of ways to get people to buy into you and to be influenced and to share your vision. But for me and for us, it is about valuing people, valuing relationships, wanting to see people win. I want to see people win. I find that intrinsically motivating. Forget the money, forget everything else. I want to see people win at work and in their lives. I want to see them win with their families. I want to see them do well, and the older you get, the more you realize, that's no guarantee. So if I can be part of somebody's success, that makes me excited. That builds a relationship. Now, listen, we have businesses that we run, right? And we've got to make money, and we want to make money. We want to achieve goals, and all those kinds of things. So I will call on people to plug and play with me on different projects. But it's always built on that foundation of like, hey, there you are, Mike, it's awesome to see you. And to really mean it. Like, it's fun to just be in it together. It's fun to collaborate. And life is a team sport. So I don't know if I gave you I don't know if that's the word, but that's how I describe it.
No, I love it. I thought that was very good, and it's great. I think it will clear up any confusion if there was any out there. I want to talk about the next one, though. I chuckled when I saw this, become the hunter versus the hunted at industry conferences and events. I know executives that refrain from sending some of their talented people to conferences and events. They'd love to send them. They know the person deserves to go. They know they would learn something, but they are afraid that person is going to run into somebody that can offer them and will offer them the bigger, better deal. And so clearly they feel as if they're the hunted. And so I laughed at this because I've got personal experience in it. So talk to us about this. How does somebody become the hunter I'm assuming you're looking, use these conferences and events as a way to locate top tier talent and begin relationships with them. So how do you do that vice getting your best people picked off?
Yeah, well, listen, getting your best people picked off is a real thing. Now, I will say at the leadership level, if I'm afraid to send somebody to a trade event because I think they're going to get picked off, I got bigger problems. Right. However, if I've got sales engineers or technical talent or, that I'm afraid to send to them, I mean, listen, there's some reality to that. Money, as a friend of mine says, money doesn't talk, it screams. So, depending on the talent market, if people start throwing that kind of money and doing all that kind of thing, then maybe you're going to lose some folks. I will say that this is a matter of substance over talk. And what I mean by it is this. Everybody talks about culture. Our culture, our people, our culture. 10 to 15% mean it. Everybody else is just saying what they need to say. Yeah. But the companies that mean it, and they believe in themselves, and they believe that they have a great culture. And there is some level, I think it's most applicable to senior people, but also even down. Hey, you don't want to be here? Go ahead and leave. We run a great shop. We have a good time. We look out for one another. We make good money. And, and if you've got a place that you think you can do better, go ahead. Having said that, talk about being the hunter, not the hunted. I'll tell you the practicality of this is as follows. One of the reasons that recruiting firms are still around is that there are one-off roles that you're not used to having to fill. CFO is the classic example of this. You got to have a CFO. If your CFO is retiring or your CFO leaves or your CFO gets fired, you got to have somebody in the seat. But you don't hire a CFO all the time. Right. That's typically, you're going to go to a recruiting firm. And it's a C-level role. You're going to get some help somehow, some way to find a recruiter. But if you run a sales organization, you hire and fire salespeople all the time. That's where you ought to be the hunter. It's a role that you're used to filling. You know the job. You have the scorecard. Listen, it's pretty simple because you can boil all this stuff down pretty simply. I need somebody who can do 5 things. My scorecard is 5 things. I can put it on an index card. I know what it looks like. Number 1. Number 2, and this ties into turning B players into A players and this type of thing. Do you know how to train and coach and develop people? And I'm not talking about sending them into some conference room somewhere and, clicking PowerPoint at them. I mean, like, you have a core business. Do you have a business philosophy and process that you really believe in? Would you rather hire somebody who was really talented, who you could train, versus trying to hire some knucklehead from the competition who's never been particularly good, but they have, industry experience? If you'd rather train them and the role, then you are the hunter. Every event that you go to, every conference, every meeting, everything, you and your leadership team should have your eyes and ears open for the right next talent. My great story about this has happened years ago, Mike, but I will never forget it. And I talk about it in the book. I still do a lot of speaking, and I was speaking for the Engineers Club in St. Louis, Missouri, Central West End, beautiful part of town. And it was like a lunch meeting, like a local chapter. It wasn't this, huge thing. So I don't know, there are 80 people in the room, and I get up on the podium and I'm talking. And if you looked out across, so you know how this is, right? I mean, I got 80 people in the room. I got 10 tables of 8. Everybody's around the round tables. Everybody's chit-chatting. I got 80 people in the room. 79 of them are what a client of mine used to describe as seasoned youth, licensed engineers between the ages of like 25 and 35, somewhere in there, right? Otherwise known as like happy hunting grounds. You want to talk about being the hunted, like these people, this is who you want to hire. And then I got one guy over here to my left, 50, well-dressed, put together. He's very quietly holding court at his table of 8. And if I am nothing else, I am curious. And I'm always curious, particularly about people. I'm like, who is this guy? I mean, he just so clearly didn't fit. Very comfortable. You could tell it's not like it was his first time there, but So I made my way over to him after the talk. And my joke here is to say, I live in Philadelphia, or else right outside of Philly right now. So in Philly, if you see somebody like that, you walk up to him, you say, hey, I'm Eric. What's your name? John. Hey, John, what are you doing here? You don't look like you fit. Like, that's in Philadelphia. That's how you talk, right? That's not how you talk in the Midwest, right? In the Midwest, you say, you introduce yourself, hello. And then I ask some elliptical question like, hey, I'm just curious, what's the value that you find from participating in the group? But he hadn't gotten the Midwestern memo, because this guy was from Southern Illinois, right across the Mississippi. He looked right at me. He said, Eric, that's very simple. I'm recruiter in chief for my business.
Love it.
Hey, listen. Yeah. His name was John Shively, Shively Geotechnical. It was a long, long time ago. I still remember. Was John passing out business cards and like twisting elbows and recruiting people? No. You know what he was doing? He was showing up once a month to the engineers club, or to this engineering group in the Central West End, and having lunch with people and being around, because he owned a business. He was aspirational for the people in the room. They wanted to get to know him. He got to know them. And then guess what? Sooner or later, every A player runs into problems. Every A player gets frustrated. Every A player is passed over for promotion. Who do you think they're going to call? They're going to call John Shively at Shively Geotechnical. It's a long-term commitment to relational leadership. We're building relationships. It's investing in relationships, because it's going to pay off. There's going to be a cash flow from it, but like every investment, there's a time frame in which that investment is going to really start to cash flow. So that's my story.
Yeah, no, I love that. And as soon as you talked, I put the devious part of my mind to work. I'm like, the old timer was there recruiting. That's what he was doing. He was there grooming relationships, and he's looking around like, I'm the only old guy here. This is great. The other ones are playing golf, or, they're at the country club. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But you know what? Think about the level of intentionality that takes.
Yes.
Guy's making plenty of money. He's in good shape. He doesn't have to be there. He has decided to intentionally invest that chunk of time there, because he feels like it's the best place he can invest his time. Yeah.
Well, you're describing something. I don't know if you know this, but I got to throw a little military stuff at you. What you described and what he did, he was employing a warfare concept called asymmetric warfare. And asymmetric warfare is where you attack an enemy's weaknesses through methods that most enemies won't. Most people won't. They'll go front on at the enemy, they'll bomb them, whatever. Asymmetric is when you use cyber warfare and, shut down their supermarkets and ATMs and things like that. So while all the other CEOs had recruiting departments, retained search, and maybe were, talking to a few people, he was playing the asymmetric warfare game by doing what no other CEO was doing. He was in that engineers meeting, and he was fostering really what was the previous statement you made, relationships, relational leadership. He was focusing on the relationship first. And it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Like you said, if one of those folks or more has a need, they get disillusioned, they want to go somewhere, who's the first person they think of?
That's exactly right.
At that point, it's a fait accompli. So, yeah, thank you for that. I'm interested in the next one here as well. One of the hallmarks of the book is being able to describe how to find pools of A-player talent your competitors are missing. And I love to hear your comments on this, because, first of all, I think I'm very interested in it. I want to learn it myself. And secondly, it's a big deal with leaders, trying to get talent in there. So if they can find existing pools, much less hidden pools, I think that would be a plus. So I'll stop rambling now and let you go.
Yeah. So here's the thing I would say, and again, let's put a specific focus on small and mid-market businesses versus Fortune 500, even Fortune 1000. So on the one hand, in my first recruiting job not out of college, but my first recruiting job, one of the things I realized is I have my weaknesses, but I'm always willing to call high. So I was calling very high up into Monsanto, right? And I got a hold of the corporate controller for the entire thing. I mean, that's a very big job. And he's like, yeah, Eric, I need to hire a financial analyst, and I need him to do this, this, and this. And by the way, before you start telling me that that person's really hard to find, that's not true. because we're willing to pay them this. And actually people with the MBA and these is kind of a dime a dozen, but I need the person who not only can do those things, but can do this. That's one game. Okay. Plenty of talent out there. We're just looking to kind of like cream off the top 10 to 20%, kind of top grading in its perfect form. Okay. Well, you're in a middle market, fast growth middle market company. You don't have that luxury. You don't have those kinds of talent pools. You can't compete. If you go head to head, you have to hire a senior salesperson. You got to have to go head to head with the Fortune 500 company. You're not going to win on comp alone. That's not happening.
Right.
So the thing that I see is this: companies are often scared to go outside of their industry. They want to hire industry experience. Why? Because these are mid-market companies. They're lean and mean. They don't have any time to bring people up to speed. And I understand that. In fact, in some ways, I understand that a lot more than I did when I wrote this book. However, in the end, and this is a story I tell from a company that I worked. I worked for a very successful company with a very, very successful entrepreneur. So this guy was like a winner, but he was fixated on industry experience and hiring industry experience. And when he hired his account executives, high level consultative salesperson people, he only wanted to hire people with industry experience. And let's say there were 15 salespeople, right? And all you saw was a revolving door of 13 of the 15. I mean, hire him, fire him, hire him, fire him, hire him, fire him. Two guys stuck around and made millions. This was in the sales incentive and personnel and motivation industry. The background of the one was in printing. The background of the other was in beer wholesaling. But we're only going to hire people with industry experience because it's a security blanket. And because the idea of investing time in people is unappealing because we're so busy. Except that it mostly doesn't work. Because there's a reason that these fee players are getting churned out of your competitors. They weren't making significant contributions there, and they're not going to make significant contributions for you. So what's a person to do? Well, in that situation, you figure out, I need salespeople who could do this and this. I'll train them in the industry. I need them to be killer. And if I can find them, I'm willing to train them and invest. It's a longer term game. It does take more time, but in the end, that's the companies that win. Most companies are just not willing to do this. They're just not willing to do it. You can talk to your blue in the face. They still won't do it. But if you run a company where this is resonating with you and you do it, it will work. I guarantee it. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're implying something, but I'd like you to hit it head on. I think what you're implying is not only will this work more often than not, but any economy that you think by, I'm going to hire industry people, they got a better chance at making it and all that. And if I take a flyer and hire people from other industries, they might churn and all of that. I'm on your side on this one. I think if you take a chance and you hire, like you said, the killer, if you hire for character, attitude, the meat eaters of the world, chances are they can sell your product too. And in the long run, if you're paying them right, they're going to sell and they're going to stay. And in the long run balance sheet, you will not only have saved a lot of money on churn, you will have loaded your team with just meat eaters who are harvesting revenue. Any thoughts?
I totally agree. I'll tell you something that I learned as a headhunter. I learned another corollary of this principle that actually goes a long way to explaining why this doesn't happen as much as you and I think it ought to. So I worked for, again, my first job in recruiting. And I had an individual that I was recruiting. She was right out of the Big Five. So 5 years of experience, passed a CPA exam on her first sitting, had skyrocketed through there. She was like a senior manager by fourth year, fifth year, something crazy. That's very, very fast progression. Super smart, great grades. She was a model on the side. I mean, it was ridiculous, right? I mean, and so I was calling and kind of marketing her background to some firms. And one of the dynamics in a place like St. Louis, which is where I was that there was this relatively small handful of really kind of prestigious big employers, right? And then a lot of family-owned companies. And that dynamic has only gotten more so over the years. So I called one of these prestigious employers, and I was talking about her background, and he was like, yeah, Eric, sure, absolutely, man, I'll talk to her. But listen, one thing that you and I both know, there's not that many places for an A player to work. Now, that was not to my advantage to agree to that point. So I disagreed with him. I was like, whatever his name was, Mike. I'm like, listen, I'm talking to like 7 different companies. Da, 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 da. I hung the phone up. I thought he's exactly right. And when you get into retained search, that's one of the things that you learn, because executives talk all the time. Like, I want to hire A players. I want to hire A players. Guess what? Recruiting is a matchmaking. It's a brokerage process, and the best long-term deals come about when you match great talent with great companies. Just like there's not that much A player talent out there, there are not that many A player companies out there. There just are not. That's the harsh reality. And so, people are like, I'm going to hire A players. I'm going to hire this, but I'm not willing to invest in people. I want you to, our compensation is average. It's okay. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. We're not going to provide the resources. You got to fill everything. You're going to spend 40% of your time entering stuff in the CRM, and we want you to be an A player. To which real A players be like, say, no, thank you. So it's both the company and the individual has to make a decision. This is who I am. Am I bringing the goods? Do I really know who I am? Am I really playing to my unique ability, my comparative advantage? And then if I am, then I'm going to work assiduously to add create as much value as I can. And then ultimately, hopefully, we're going to find one another. And that's actually how this works well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, Eric, we're out of time, and your answer so far, your content has been great. The audience is going to love it, but I can't let you out of here without asking you the fantasy question I ask of everybody on the podcast. If you could bring back one leader from the past and talk to that person, live with them, bring him back or her back for a day, who would you choose and why?
It would be Jesus, because I think he embodied this dramatic set of contrasts that from a leadership perspective, I really admire, which are incredible strength, incredible tenderness, incredible intensity, incredible gentleness. It goes on and on and on. And if for somebody who is wired the way I am, and this is just me, but for somebody who's wired the way I am, I believe that contrast of taste, that sweet and sour, is part of the magic that makes leaders really attract people around them.
Yeah, well said. Well, listen, I know people are going to want to find your company. How do we find your company? How do we find your book? And how do people find you if they want to contact you?
All right. Well, let's start with me. So it's Eric Herrenkohl, Herrenkohl, first name Eric. So if you Google that, I'll pop up. If you just Google my last name, it may be my brothers or my parents who pop up. So you put us both in. And then easiest way to contact me is probably through LinkedIn. Actually, the business is called AchieveNEXT. Exactly what it sounds like, all one word. We're a leadership consulting firm based outside of Philadelphia. Do a ton of work in the middle market. One of the things that makes us stand out is that we have a sister company, the CFO Alliance. That's a true North American network of middle market CFOs, both investor backed and privately held, from every industry you could imagine. So we really have a big reach network wise. And for me and my team, we do executive coaching. So working with executive leadership teams, working with individual executives. And then we do also provide executive career coaching, leveraging all of our background as headhunters and helping individual executives successfully navigate the job search. And if any of those things line up for you, I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being here. A great conversation. The audience is going to love it. Selfishly, I would request that you consider coming back and doing it again someday. I could tell we just scratched the surface, and I truly appreciate your time, Eric. This is going to be a well-received episode, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed meeting you as well.
All right. Be well.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Heracles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.